Was 1975 the worst year at Mercedes? $1975 was a rough year in general because a new round of inflation began to kick in where you used to go to the store and for $5 you'd get all your groceries for a month. Maybe not a month, maybe a week. I can't relate. And then all of a sudden, inflation kicked in over a period of like 12 to 18 months, and suddenly $25 or so is what you need to buy your groceries for a week. I mean, compared to today, things are still cheap, but this presented a major problem for auto manufacturers like Mercedes Benz, where cars were priced at under $10,000, then all of a sudden, they had to be double or triple that amount. And in fact, I remember one of my customers telling me that he had negotiated a deal with the trade-in his dad had for a 1976 450 SL that he'd ordered at the tail end of 1975. And the car with the trade-in was like $7,600, but Mercedes said, oh, we can't honor that. Actually, I think it was $6,700 because he traded in another almost new Mercedes. And what happened was when he went to go pick the car, they'd pick the car up, they'd unilaterally raised all of their prices, and suddenly he was caught between a rock and a hard spot because Mercedes needed to get more money for this car. They couldn't just sell the car for $6,700. Now it was like $18,000, which is almost 3 times as much. Now granted, a 450 SL for $18,000 a day is a pretty good deal if it's a really nice, well-kept car. But back then it was all the money in the world, and when your disposable income, that's the problem with inflation, your disposable income doesn't just go up overnight, and incomes take a long time to catch up. We've found that in those dark years of 75, 76, 77, when a market correction occurred, Mercedes sales weren't hurt that much, but the main business that sustained Mercedes was selling 240Ds in the United States. People bought 115 series 240Ds because they were economical. Sometimes they'd register them under their company name so that they could get a tax write-off because of the use of diesel. It was just hard times, but specifically for gas cars, there was another issue that cropped up. And in 1975, new federal emission standards had been announced, or for 1975, I should say, that required the use of catalytic converters. And these cars had to run as lean and hot as possible. They had to have giant catalysts attached to the side of the cylinder head where, I've complained about the 75 450 SL, where the combination of D-Jetronic injection, which was still in use just for that year, and the giant catalytic converters and the lean settings on the manifold absolute pressure sensor and the engine computer led to a potential disaster in hot climates like Florida, especially if you were running your AC all the time. In addition, there were some other issues that culminated in 75 and 76, such as the rapid deterioration of palm fiber pads inside the seats, low quality steel that caused the cars to rust faster than average. And if you look at a 116 compared to a 108 or an early 115 compared to a later 115, you'll find that the rust proofing on those later cars, even though they tried to rust proof them better, it actually led to more of them rusting away because they would plug the holes in the body by overspraying too much body schutz on the holes, and water would get trapped inside and they'd rust from the inside out. Whereas you didn't see this carelessness on some of the earlier cars. That's why I'm always shocked when I see like a 71 or 72 250 that somehow survived for 30 years in a climate up north, despite the fact it wasn't totally protected. I mean, it might have some rust, but the car is still mostly intact. Whereas if you were to expose a 75 450 SE to this, the firewall would have rusted out or something like that, or the sunroof panned. So 75 was a rough year. Now, does it mean that all 75 and ultimately 76 model year Mercedes are bad? Well, no, but you have to judge the individual cars harder. For example, if you look at any 75 model year Mercedes, you're going to be taking the seats apart and replacing the internal pads. You're going to be dealing with premature, well, it's not premature anymore because we're at like the 50-year mark, but you're going to see more cracked dashboards. You're going to see carpets that deteriorated faster. You're going to see rust in weird places. And you're going to see emissions issues that were covered up again and again and again by subsequent techs who didn't really know what they were doing. And in this case, I'm not going to point the finger. Even Mercedes Education for Excellence didn't really do a good job of explaining the theory behind each emissions component. And oftentimes the only real solution was to backdate the cars to 74 specifications. That's why if you buy a 75 Mercedes anything that's got a gas engine, you have to get 74 and earlier exhaust manifolds and exhaust system just to get the cats off of the motor so that the engine can start to breathe again. Now there's one other reason why I think 1975 model year Mercedes didn't do as well. And I think 75 and 76 were dark days in the United States. You had the Nixon administration wrapping up, and you had a lot of issues with the Vietnam War. You had a lot of angry people. Again, you had rampant inflation. You know, society was in this mode where it was just like, screw it. You know, I feel like that's the vibe that I got from 1975. And people didn't really, I find that unlike the generation of people that bought Mercedes in the 1960s, at least a good chunk of them, people who bought Mercedes in 1975 and 76 just didn't take care of them. And that's something my dad often told me. He said people just did not maintain those cars. And it had to do with two reasons. One, because maintaining them was expensive and they were already angry because they had to pay more for them. And number two, because better cars came out, and those cars instantly went back on the used car market and were replaced by either later versions of the 116 or 107, or by the 126, or by the 123 if you had a 115. And the cars just sort of, you know, bad things happened to them. You know, things, unspeakable things. The cars were just pretty much left to die. You know, and that's why when we see a lot of 75 450 SLs, for example, which is about the most surviving model from 1975. They're usually just in very rough condition. That's why you almost never see a 75 280C or 280 sedan, because people got sick of 14 miles per gallon, 110 horsepower, and then when you could just go out and buy a 280E with 143 horsepower and 18 miles per gallon, it was like, why not? You know, just dump this thing, make it go away. Anyway, if you guys found this video informative and helpful, I hope you share it with a friend of yours. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much to all of our Patreon supporters. We really appreciate you guys keeping our cameras rolling. And if any of you, again, have a video topic, you know, and you're a Patreon subscriber, send it to me and we'll get it done. So thank you so much. See you in the future.